So I've decided to quickly go over the Lab 2 steps that are probably ideal for us to follow here. Maybe go through a couple of other things along the way. I'm going to try to do this fairly quickly though, so get your pause button ready and make sure to hit the speed that you prefer. So if you want to slow down my voice or speed up my voice, there's going to be a control in the bottom right of this recording, so you should be able to adjust it to your heart's content. Okay, so the instructions start here. It says before you begin, download and uncompress the zip file. I've already done that, so I've got the files open here. I've got an index file and the starter script file that I gave you. You'll notice that it says this lab is focused on your ability to use arrays and loops. So if you did not use arrays and loops, you probably did not do it correctly. And it also says we're not going to perform validation on the form. That means that we're not going to double check that the user entered everything okay. We're going to just assume that the user always enters valid information. So if you didn't really read those instructions, you kind of missed some of the point here. I want you to kind of take that as a lesson and take a moment to remember to read every instruction carefully before you start any lab or test. All right, so part one, I should say, we are doing 3 quick steps. Just going to add a script tag linking the script.js file. So I'm going to do that always at the bottom of my body tag. So here I'm going to go script source equals script.js. I also generally like my code inside of my body to be indented 1 space, so I'm going to fix that up for the rest of my code. All right, the other thing that I asked you guys to do is to add code. So add code, don't change code. Add code to the submit event on the form tag that will run the function that has been prepared for you in script.js. Okay, so we're going to go here. This is script.js. This is the function that's been prepared for you. We're going to run that function by using the function name followed by the invocation operator. The only thing that might have been kind of a little bit ambiguous is where do you put it? Do I put it after this return false thing, or do I put it before the return false thing? And the answer is before, because return false will stop everything that's going on in submit. So now I've done everything that I'm supposed to do inside of the HTML file. Next step is stay away from the rest of the HTML file. Do not make any more changes. I think most people caught on to that. So let's have a look at the results so far. If I refresh, I type in a name, I hit get total. You notice my name doesn't change, it stays there. That's because this return false here, if done correctly and as long as your code doesn't have any errors, will cancel the form from being able to submit. So like I've said before, this is not the most foolproof way to do it, but we don't know how to hook our functions to events just yet. So that's something that we're going to need to improve on. For now, though, we will just stick with what we've got. However, to make sure that our function is running, because we're not really getting any information here, we can use a console log and just say, hello world or something like that to ensure something's happening. I've always got my console open while I'm doing development. So let's put in my name, hit get total, and you can see hello world shows up. No matter how many times I hit get total, there it is. Now, if you're not getting any information in your console, even though you're following along, you've done something syntactically incorrect in your form or in your script here, and it's causing the page to refresh. You can find out what those errors are. There's a little cogwheel up here in your console, and you can check the box preserve log. So if any errors are caused and your page ends up refreshing anyway, you'll see the error information here, and that should hint it at you. But when the page refreshes, that information gets automatically cleared, like as if I press this clear console button. So that's if we put preserve log, it doesn't clear the log when the page reloads. You can see the tooltip says so. So I'm good now. If I refresh, you'll notice that it says navigated to. I can navigate over and over again, do other stuff, and it'll keep my log for me the whole time. I can clear it here anytime I need, though, if it gets too noisy. Okay, so I know that my function is running. What do I do next? Next step is gather information from the form. I've explained here that a function's been started for you. There are 2 lines of code that have been provided to gather references, and that they're gathered in an array-like format. So you can think of these here, radios and checkboxes, as arrays of HTML element references. Now, what are HTML element references? Well, we've got them so many times before by using get element by ID. I did notice a lot of people kind of forgetting that we use get element by ID up until now and seeing get elements by name and thinking it's the same thing, and it's not. So the final step here is let's get some text controls and other controls off the form where the users entered information for us that make that help us to figure out how much this pizza is going to cost. So we want to get the contact name and phone number, and we want to get the select drop-down value. All right, so let's have a look at what those look like. I have no idea how this got folded up quite like that, so I'll fix that real quick. Okay, so I've got a txt name text box here, and I've got a txt phone number text box here. I've also got a CBO base select box here. Now, if you have a hard time kind of reading through the code and finding those things so you can figure out what's named what, you could always right-click on here and do inspect. And then you'll see it highlights in the Elements tab what that text box is, and you can see the name and ID and all that on it as well. If you hover over a different element in here, it'll highlight that whole element, so you can see I can make sure that this is the phone text box. I can also right-click on my drop-down box and hit inspect, right? So I've got all the IDs by looking at elements if I need to. So my next step then is to create references to those. So const name text box is equal to document dot get element by ID, the same one we've been using since the beginning of class. This get elements by name is a completely different thing, and that's why you're kind of told what it does and asked to kind of like just accept it for what it is. So get element by ID, we're going to go txt name, and then we're going to go phone text box, phone, and we're going to get that from txt phone. And we're also going to get a base pizza select box. And I like to make sure that we are naming these variables. So it was CBO base, by the way. I'm just double checking this here. Yeah. I want to make sure that we're calling these names that make sense for what they are. This is not the text box value. This is a reference to the whole text box object. That's why I name the variable text box. If it was a checkbox, I'd name it checkbox. If it was a select box like here, I would name it select box, although I probably would just name it that way. Case doesn't matter quite as much when you're choosing the name, as long as you consistently use the same case and it's some form of camel case. The next thing we're moving on to is part 3 here. So it's calculate the total price for the pizza as follows. And this is just a kind of step-by-step set of here's how you do it. I did warn you that 3C and D would take you the most time because it was probably the newest thing to you, and you probably had to do a little bit of looking things up to figure it out. So 3A, the initial price is determined by base pizza type that was selected. So whatever is in the drop-down box, the base pizza select box, right? So let's initialize a total variable to the base pizza cost. It's this simple. Let total equal base pizza select box dot value. Now, because all values coming from form controls are strings to begin with, we're going to make sure that it's treated like a number. Right, so total is now a value based on what's been selected from that drop-down list. And you can see it's 0, 10, 25, etc. Now, we're not going to do a check to make sure it's not 0 this time. That's part of those initial instructions here that says we're not going to perform validation on the form. That would be validation. We don't need to do that right now. Next, we're going to loop through the size options, and then I say those are the radio buttons. We're going to find one that's checked and add the value of that selected one to the total. Okay, so we're going to loop. Let's use a for loop. Let I equal 0. I less than, and we're going to go through the radio buttons. So I'm going to go radios.length, I++. I'm going to use my for loop to detect which of those is checked just by asking, if radios at this index is checked. Now I can also say checked equals true, but this here, not using the is it equal to true here, is a shorthand if you have a Boolean variable. So if it's checked, then I'm going to take total and I'm going to add the value of that check or radio button to it. So dot value. Now we also have to remember radio buttons, checkboxes, whatever it is, form controls always come in as text, so I have to parse float here as well. That's it. We've already figured out now that next instruction. And you might want to make sure that you label that with a sort of a comment. So I'm going to go find the one that's checked. All right. This is the kind of comment you might want to put in there. And then add the value of the selected size option to the total. Okay, that's what I'll do here. Right? And then for my total, initialize the total to the base pizza cost. So this is the kind of commenting I'm looking for from you guys now, so you can tell me exactly what your code is doing and why. All right, next bit is prepare a set of parallel arrays for topping codes. Okay, so we'll do that. Looks like I missed a space there. Okay, so I'm going to actually even go through here and copy paste it into my space here, just so that I have something to see in my vision. That'll make it a little bit easier, so I won't have to go back and forth to the documentation there. But I can create an array directly out of it. And since it's cents and we're adding that to dollars, we want to make sure that we put in a period before the last two numbers, regardless of how that shows up. And this is going to be costs. And then we're going to go codes. Making sure we've got our equal sign there. And this is a string, so I'm going to put, actually, let's make sure we're putting single quotes as much as possible here. Good practices. We're not monsters. Okay. All right, making sure we have our semicolons in there. Good to go. I've prepared my two parallel arrays. Now that one, like I said, would probably have taken you a couple more minutes, but the parallel arrays is the easy part. The hard part is D here, looping through the topping checkboxes. So that's these guys. All right, we're going to see if a checkbox is checked. If it is, let's look at those checkboxes here. All right. The value is going to be one of those codes that we put in the first array. So the value is going to be extra cheese, extra sauce, olive, or anchovies. We're going to find out what its index is in the codes array and use that index to get the corresponding price from here. So let's start just by outputting what codes are selected. We're going to go for, let I equal 0, I less than checkboxes.length. And then we're going to say if checkboxes at I is checked, console.log checkboxes I.value. Right. So let's see what that does here. I'm going to refresh. I'll check just those three. So that should be extra cheese, extra sauce, and anchovies, no olives. Right. Oh, radio is not defined. Where did I put that? That is here. I put in S. So you see how when I got an error, I saw it in here. That was because I put preserve log on, and it ended up navigating, but I still got to see what caused it. It tells me it's on line 18, so I was able to go find it on line 18 and fix it. Now if I try this again, first of all, you'll notice that all this stuff is in my address bar now, and that's kind of doesn't help us very much right now. So I'm going to refresh that page with a fresh URL, and we'll do the same thing. And look, we get extra cheese, extra sauce, anchovies. So that was what my console log was about. If it's checked, output that. So now we need to find the index of that in codes. Now, if you did not do the research, you would have had to do something brute force here. So if you didn't do research, I'm going to create an index variable, index equal, and I'll just make it -1 right now. Remember, that indexes can start at 0, so -1 just means that it hasn't been found yet. It's sort of a symbolic meaning. So we're going to go through for let, and now here's the thing, I already have an I in the outer scope, so I need to make sure that I use something else on the inner scope. So I'm just going to use J in this case. That's also a common thing if you're using nested loops. And we're going to go through all the codes. All right. And we're going to ask if the current code is equal to the checkbox's value. Now here's the thing. To do that, I have to go if codes J is equal to checkboxes I.value. That's how you ask the question if you don't have kind of go-between variables. And I'm sure that some of you, since you're new to this, your eyes are just bugging out right now going, what the heck does that mean? Well, let's break it down a little bit. Here I'm just going to say let value equal, or actually let's call it topping, because each of them represents a topping code, right? We're going to say checkboxes I.value. Now I'm going to ask if the current code is equal to the topping code that came in, so the one that the person selected. All right, if it is, then we're going to set that index to J, which is, which code did we currently find? So it would have been one of those, right? So then we just need to say total plus equals. And actually, I'm going to bring this out of this inner for loop. It actually doesn't matter where you put it for this particular instance, but we're going to say it's equal to costs at that same index we just found. And that works. In fact, that's 100% correct. And for the last bit, I'm going to console.log my total. All right, and I'm going to refresh. So we're going to go with 10.25, and we're going to add just anchovies to a small pizza. So small pizzas are $0. So I'll have 10.25 plus the cost of anchovies, and anchovies are 50 cents. So it should be 10.75. Refresh. I may have forgot something important here, and I did. So it tells me total's not a number. Oops. That's because sorry, that's because I totally used I over here when I should have been using J. I'm sure some of you caught that. So I'm going to use J. Oops. These things happen. Everybody makes mistakes, but we debug them, we find them. And let's refresh, and I'm going to try this again. Total is now 10.75 as expected, so 10.25 plus 0 plus the 50 cents for my anchovies, right? So that's one way of doing it. We can use the loop to make that happen. However, there is a shorter way to do it, and you may have had a little bit of a hard time figuring out how to do it. But if you went to array methods in W3 schools, as I recommended to some of you when you were at this step, we're going to go to JavaScript, and we're going to find array methods, and we're going to do search. Nope. And do index. All right, that's not quite what we're looking for, but we could also go to references for JavaScript, find array, and I can do search. And look, when I search for the word search in the JavaScript array reference here, it highlights a couple of the keywords here, and you can see index of. Search the array for the element, for an element, and return its position. So let's have a look at what that does. You can see I have an array of fruits here, and A is fruits index of apple. What does that do? Well, you hit try it yourself, and click try it, and it tells you apples at index 2, and that's true, 0, 1, 2. So index of is another way to search an array. We discussed that earlier before I'm doing this review, so some of you are already pretty familiar with it. But rather than going through and doing this second inner loop, we could have instead said index equals codes dot index of topping code. All right, so again, same thing. So index.dev kind of has this native code that already does this looping for us, and so it saves us a little bit of visual space, makes life easier to see here. So if I could do it like that, I'd still get the same result. So I'll show you 1025, anchovy small, and you can see I still get 1075. If I add more toppings on, the price goes up, and so on. Okay, so our last step then is to get a reference to our output text box. And our output text box here is under order total. So it's a text area, and the ID is txt order total, so I'm going to get a limit by that ID. And then I'm going to say output textbox.value is equal to, and then let's look at some of our sample output. What I'll do is I'll actually type in the sample output word for word, and then we're going to replace the necessary words with the correct values from our form. So Fred, your total is 20, 25. If we have any questions, we will be sure to call you at, and then we'll put in just sort of a sample number for a minute, 9999. And I'm not going to stop it here because I'm going to add a little more text on the next line. I'm going to go plus, and thank you so much for your patronage. All right, so all that'll do for us though is fill in the text box with that hard-coded text. So let's see, you know, it doesn't matter what we select really here. You can see it gives us that exact message. There's a couple of things. We've got no enter spaces here like we would prefer. So to do that, we put in /n, \n. We'll put a period here, and then we'll replace the values with the actual values from the form. So for example, for Fred, we would probably want somebody's name. So I'll put name textbox.value plus. And it says your order total is, gives us a $sign, but doesn't give us the correct value. So let's put in total. And then instead of this false phone number, we'll put in a real phone number, which will be phone textbox.value. Now if I refresh, your total is $13. If we have any questions, we'll be sure to call you. Now, let's just go through a couple of the sample pieces of data here. So I've got $999. His name was Fred. He did get Hawaiian. It's at large. Extra cheese, extra sauce, olives, and anchovies. So you can see that your output matches what was put in as input here. All right. Then we're going to go through and do the second example. Denise. We won't bother changing our phone number. It's kind of the same deal either way. It's just sort of copied directly. We'll get a medium size, no extra cheese, no extra sauce, but she'll get olives and anchovies, and her total is $16, and that's correct. And finally, Mr. Bean. $13.50. All right. Now, if it's bugging you that you're not getting the full dollar prices, there's one more step you could have taken. This was not really a required thing, but you could have gone here, and total is a numeric value. So either here directly inside of your text or just before, we can go total equals total.toFixed and give it a value of 2 to say I want 2 numbers after my decimal place all the time. And then I could fill in, let's get rid of the extra cheese here. There we go. 50, no. There we go. That's an even dollar value. So it wouldn't have had any decimal places, but it ends up with 2. And that's what toFixed does.